Yeah, so Richie, how's the tropical storm forecast look for the next anything coming on now in the
No,
coming
we
up
just
week?
had our tropical storm this weekend. It's kind of like surprise, tropical
Mhm.
storm. Woo!
Yeah.
That's
That was
it.
it.
All right.
It knocks.
Rained
It's like
all
trick or
day.
treat. Yeah.
So my dad
Hello.
had to actually take water out of the pool like 3 times, otherwise it was going to overflow. But other than that, big
When you
deal.
say take water out of the pool, does he like have a knob that he turns and then it gets diverted somewhere, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's just at the pump.
Overflow.
Just sets it to outflow and it dumps out to the street.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes sense. I
Hmm.
was envisioning like buckets, 55-gallon drums, trying to empty it out. I was like, oh, that seems kind of
That
painful.
would be funny. That would
Yeah.
damn, I should have thought about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just turn of a knob.
Well, folks, go ahead and get your technical questions in, or non-technical, professional development, whatever it is you want to ask. We go through them first come, first serve, so feel free to go fire away over in the Q&A panel. When you run out of questions, we start drinking for the day. Woohoo! Not really.
Oh, I'm not drinking. Oh my gosh.
No?
So I you know that there was some files that didn't process yesterday and they're
Mhm.
stuck in one of the queues and I was looking through the code. I'm like, nothing is going to pick these up in the manner I thought they were. So now it's a matter of, okay, what should be happening and what do I need to do to get it there? So that's fun.
Oh, it never ends. And being a developer, especially being like the only developer, you know that anything that goes wrong, it's somehow related to you, and that's got to be some kind of frustrating.
Um,
No, that's not true. A
no.
lot of what you do is probably either due to one of two things: my bad specs or my bad queries. Those can also
Okay,
be legitimate
so
causes.
I did fix a lot of your queries yesterday for the indexing stuff that I just started working on. So I'm
Woo.
like,
Mhm.
okay, so I went in and reformatted it so humans and not Ozarians. Is that what you prefer to call it?
To be
Can,
fair,
can
I
read
don't
it.
like that format either. The only reason I use it is you said you reformat all my stuff. Otherwise, I
I
would
reformat.
format it in. Yeah.
Yeah, I reformatted it all, and then I have to go and rethink. And it's like, okay, so what data do we have in the system, and will this work? And two, how can I write a test around that data?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of thought that needs to be going, especially for new rules. It's like, okay, well, what is really going on here, and how is it coming in, and then how can I automate those tests and populate data so those tests actually start firing?
That's the I love the unit testing around constant care. It's fantastic.
Ugh.
Let's see. So we'll go ahead and get started on questions. Rich is asking a question, but this also means Rich is not doing his homework from the training class because Rich is in our mastering index tuning class right now. But he's doing such a good
Ah.
job on homework that I will let it pass. So Rich says, if you have servers that you can rarely get onto for maintenance, can you ever think of a time when you would keep autoshrink on?
Never. Not even in
Ooh.
a test environment.
And why not? And why not?
Why? I would wonder why you want to do
That's
this. There's only bad things that happen. I mean, what issue are you trying to solve?
yeah, especially if you can't get to them for maintenance. That makes me think that probably they're growing and on their own. Just let them grow out. Just let them grow and go for it. Sri asks, question on availability group multi-site failover. When we fail over to the synchronous node, databases are failing over with any issues, but the web app that uses JDBC and the listener timeout isn't reconnecting. What do we do to change the application's max timeout?
So it would be the connection timeout in the connection string. So there's command timeout and then connect timeout, or connection timeout might be. So those are two different things. You'd want connection timeout, but I suspect maybe your multi-subnet failover connection parameter, you either don't have it turned on in the connection string or it's not working. I would wonder about your database driver and making sure that you said JDBC JBoss. So JDBC 4.0 has multi-subnet failover. I would imagine you're on that, but something's not working there. You need to figure out, you check your connection string and see if multi-subnet failover equals true is in there, because that might be what you're missing here.
And it's worth to know too, just when your application sends a command, if they send a command, or if their command is in flight during the failover, it's just going to time out. and it's up to your application to go through and retry the same command. Like JDBC is going to return a, hey, your command timed out, and you have to go through and retry it. I say you, it's your developers, not you. But Mike says, any word on the next version of SQL Server? The word is future. So we don't know, of course, and anybody who, I always say that anyone who knows isn't allowed to say. Anyone who says, that means they don't know. But I would say that Microsoft's Ignite conference is coming the third week of September, I think. It's like the 20th through 24th. Last year at Ignite, they announced the next version of SQL Server and gave public previews. So since it seemed like they wanted to move to a yearly release cadence, that might make sense that they would announce the same thing at Ignite here in September.
So is that going to be in Orlando or?
I don't know. I don't know where Ignite is at.
Well, let's just hope they don't put it in Chicago again, because that didn't go well last time.
I've heard from several Microsoft people that they were like swearing on a Bible they would never do Chicago again ever. That it was so bad.
What was the issue?
Oh, the food was unbelievably bad, was so legendarily bad because they didn't have enough catering supplies to deal with like 30,000 people coming in at once, so they gave out cold sandwiches, cold fried chicken, then they would run out and it would be an hour before they would get more. There was a bus line going to and from the convention center because there's no hotels at the convention center that can handle that many people, of course. And the buses get trapped at rush hour, so people were on buses for an hour to get to and from their hotel, and you would have walked faster. Terrible. So.
Yeah, I think the bathroom situation was not optimal either, and just people waiting in lines forever. And
yeah, I love Chicago, but I would not want to go to a conference there. So that probably answers it there. I would watch and Ignite. The other thing I was going to say is at the past summit coming up in November, there's a bunch of public sessions where people have said we're previewing vNext here, like Microsoft has said we're previewing vNext. So that means that it's at least going to be publicly demoable in November. Heather says, do y'all have any experience with the SQL Server 2017 vulnerability assessment?
I've never even heard of it. I don't keep up to date on their extra tools.
I want to say it was an SSMS, a 17 feature, and when they brought it out, they said things like XP command shell is bad, you should turn this off. I'm like, really? Anybody who's SA can turn that on and turn that off anytime they want to, and there's like no tracing for it, so I'm not sure I take it really seriously.
Does it scan your application for SQL injection? Does it do that for you?
No. Yeah, even the plans in the cache it doesn't look at to see if they're vulnerable. Yeah, I'm like, it's kind of cheesy. And they didn't improve it at all, so I'm kind of like, oh. Sean asks, if I'm inserting stuff into a temp table, should I do select into temp table, or should I specifically say insert into temp table? Is there a performance difference?
I mean, I think one of the issues with select into is that you might not get the right data types, right? Isn't there? There's an issue there, so making sure that your temp table is created in the exact layout you want. So I usually do insert into. If I'm in a store procedure, if I'm just in Management Studio, I'm lazy and we'll do select into just because it's easier for me to write. I don't have to do the create step.
Yeah. Kendra, I believe, Kendra wrote a blog post about this. There were changes in certain versions of SQL Server where you suddenly got parallelism where you didn't before, and this matters a lot depending on how you define your code. And I never remember what the takeaway was. I always have to point people back to this because I'm with Tara. I just go, I want to create my table explicitly. Here's the data types that I want. If I want a key, here's how it looks like. Yeah, I feel really bad saying here's how I write queries these days because I am writing queries in Postgres and Richie's right here and he sees my terrible queries and I know he's just holding his mouth going, Brent, that's not really what you do. You write toilet equivalent queries. They're really bad.
No, actually the one I reviewed yesterday, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm like, oh, nice.
Which tells you that I usually write crappy queries because he was pleasantly surprised by this one. Yes. Darshan asks, Tara, why the hat?
I know, I was waiting for that. I'm surprised it didn't come up before we started with the questions. I just didn't have a chance to shower. That's just what I had on when I went to school. I don't like my hair in a ponytail, publicly. So, I needed it to be in a ponytail, so the hat's covering that.
So, Brent, why not a gray shirt?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, really. I need to get with the company uniform today. It's bad. Kevin asks, have y'all ever used Node.js with SQL Server?
That's certainly a Richie question.
No, I haven't. I have used it with Postgres with some pretty good success, but no, I haven't used it with SQL Server. That'd be a curious little, text to do that. I don't know if any. I'm assuming there's a project out there to talk to SQL Server. I've never used it or any libraries around it. So, yeah, maybe that's something I do in the future. It'd be kind of fun.
John says, I have 2 instances that should have the same logins and DB users, and I'm planning on using the second server for reporting via log shipping of a couple of databases, but I think my logins are out of sync. How can I check and correct my logins if they're needed, if I need to sync them?
You could just query, sys.logins or whatever it is, and look for the SID. But you may want to just drop them and move them over and make sure that you copy the SID. And Brent's got one of the scripts out there that can do that for you. It'll grab the password and the SIDs. But what you can do is you can transfer the databases over to that logship server and unorphan them to avoid having to do it. But I like to get my SIDs in sync so I don't have to take that extra step of unorphaning them.
Do it once, get it right, and be done with it. So the screen, for those of you listening to the podcast, it is a link to Robert Davis's script on transferring logins to a database mirror. This same technique works with log shipping, database mirroring, always on availability groups, anything where you can create different logins on different servers. Joe asks, I have an index with Joe, can you rephrase your question? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, with an index with 2 partitions. Usually people do partitioning, they do a lot more than 2 partitions, so I'm thinking there's something lost in translation there. Anna asks, do y'all recommend using PowerShell only for all DBA tasks?
We're the wrong company to ask.
No. No. Whoa. If someone said you have one tool to use DBA tasks with, PowerShell will never be my answer.
Whoa, that's inflammatory. Richie, why would you say that, Richie?
Command lines are good for certain things, but in other things, I want more of a fully function thing, and SSMS is that tool, right? I mean, it's really the best database tool out there. So why would I go down to PowerShell for everything when the best tool out there is SSMS?
And we know people are going to disagree with us. We don't manage lots of servers, so we tend to manage 1 or 2 servers at a time. Clients have us parachute in and do a really deep dive. I know people out there who have the opposing viewpoint, that they're like, if I could only use one tool for the rest of my life, it would be PowerShell. And that's cool. I think you should learn one tool really well, whatever that one tool is, and you should be amazing at that one tool. None of us on this call would choose PowerShell to be that one tool, but I know there are folks out there who do. It's just not us.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, you should use multiple tools. I mean, you should understand multiple tools. I mean, I rarely use SSMS anymore. I mean, I'm in other stuff as it is. So it only benefit your career to have multiple tools under your belt.
It's true.
Yeah, I've worked at companies that have had a lot of servers. One of the companies I worked at, we had 700 SQL servers, and back then, because it's been 5 years now since I've worked for that company, PowerShell was a thing. We had our own thing to deploy changes to a lot of servers. So we were using Management Studio's CMS, the Central Management Server options, and we had some fancy scripts that would populate the CMS with all of our servers. It would call a database of databases, we called it, and populate that. So we had the CMS already. I imagine these days that company probably is using some PowerShell because of the amount of servers, and PowerShell is fairly flexible. And it can do more than just SQL Server stuff. Whereas at the CMS, you're writing scripts, T-SQL. You can be calling out to XP command shell to do other things. But so I probably would be using it for some things, if I'm using a lot of servers, and like Anna follows up, she's got lots of servers and 5 different versions. So yeah, I mean, it has its uses, but like Richie said, it's not, you don't just only use that tool for all DBA tasks. You pick the right tool for each task.
Yeah, I mean, we get in these flame wars all the time as developers, right? Oh, Sharp is the best, and oh, it's no, it's Python, and we write lots of words on a lot of bulletin boards and hate other people. And the fact of the matter is C# really isn't as good at some things, but it's really good at others. And Node.js is good for this, and maybe not good for that. And so we have to take the positive and negatives, and it's better for me as a developer to understand those positive and negatives, and maybe even know a few of those languages, so I could actually go off and maybe do other projects that are interesting, but maybe not using the language that I prefer.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question then. If you could only learn one language right now for starters, like the first language that you would focus someone to go learn on, what would be the one language that you would pick?
Like, first is hard.
And I assume that they maybe they've already played around with programming before, but like one language to specialize in.
I mean, right now, the languages are easier, but they're also harder at the same time. Like, JavaScript, you have all this async stuff inside of it. Python may be one of those ones because you could write a lot of stuff in very little code, but it's, there's also a pretty medium to large learning curve there. So, I mean, I don't know. C#, there's a big learning curve there. Good Lord. Maybe, now that you have a gun to my head, I'd probably say Python, but there's a lot of languages that are out there that are really worthwhile, and they have really some good stuff in it. I mean, JavaScript is a good one because you could go anywhere with JavaScript now. You could do front end, you could do back end, you could go cloud, not cloud, anywhere JavaScript is running. But JavaScript is notoriously hard to learn and kind of hard to master. So, yeah, Python, why not?
Sri says, what do y'all think of the future of SQL Server for Linux? Will it be widely used at the enterprise level? Go ahead, Tara. Go ahead.
I mean, I really don't think it is. I think that the reason why Microsoft did this is because there's a lot of anti-Microsoft people who don't want to run Windows on their servers. So they've got Linux, and maybe they need to use SQL Server because some third-party application that they purchased requires SQL Server. But those third-party applications probably don't even support SQL Server running on Linux anyway. I've had recent clients where they are very anti-Microsoft. Would an anti-Microsoft company run SQL Server on top of Linux? I don't know. I worked for a company that was very anti-Microsoft. They were mostly Unix, Linux, and Oracle. We had a very large Oracle team, but we still had SQL servers. We had 5 SQL Server DBAs supporting, like I said, 700 SQL servers, and they were very, very anti-Microsoft. Would that company be running SQL Server on top of Linux? I bet you they've had discussions about it, but why? It's such a limited set of features available. I don't know. I don't really see a future for it.
I mean, is it going up against the free tools like Postgres? I mean, is that its competition, or the reason it exists for some other reason?
Yeah, it's tough. Joyanne asks, SQL dump happens once a day around the same time. Before I open the ticket with Microsoft, is there anything that I should do to narrow down the root cause? Patch. Get on the most current patch level and then open the ticket with Microsoft. You would not believe how many bugs they fix. You probably would believe it. It's a Microsoft product. I'm not saying the Microsoft products are, I'm saying the Microsoft products are buggy. Augusto asks, have y'all ever used contained databases in production? That's a no. That is a no, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Alex says, I'm fighting the poison weight resource semaphore query compile. I don't have memory pressure. There's only 80 gigs in use out of around a couple hundred gigs, and my CPU isn't bad. Is there an issue with compile memory? Yes. It means that SQL Server can't get enough memory in order to compile a query. The fact that your server has a lot of memory overall doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of memory is available to fight to do query compilations. The term that you could Google for is memory gateway, SQL Server memory gateway query compile, and there's a couple of blog posts out there from Microsoft talking about the gotchas with it. Radu says VB.NET is kind of like the Python of .NET languages in terms of learning curve. It just got wrongfully accused lately. I don't even know where to begin with this, Richie.
Okay, so I did VB.NET for a really, really long time. VB way before that, started in VB3. I understand your love for VB, but at some point, when even Microsoft stopped writing documentation for it and examples for it, you needed to get off of that and onto something else, right? Because when they're not giving you the proper support and you can't find, new features come out and all of a sudden there's not a VB and it's in C# and, there's a lagging there. I wouldn't start anything in VB.NET right now. There's really no reason for it. The problem isn't with VB.NET, the language, the learning curve, it's .NET itself. It's the framework. There's just so much going on there. Understanding the .NET framework is harder than learning the VB language, and
I agree.
Because I could go on for forever. I'm not gonna.
VB, I felt like when I was learning .NET languages, VB was the one that was most approachable to me because I knew VBScript. That was also the point where I stopped learning languages because I'm like, I don't think real programmers, this is horrible to say the stereotype, I don't think real programmers are using VB.NET. They're going to kind of phase away from that, which means that my skills are going to get outdated fast. I need to learn something else, C#, Java, JavaScript, whatever. If you're a career developer, you probably have to have that love of learning new languages and frameworks. And assuming that you do, I would want to get away from VB.NET.
Yeah, I love VB. Listen, don't get me wrong. I haven't coded it in at least a decade, but me going from VB.NET to C# was so seamless because I understood the framework, and everything else is just syntax. But understanding the framework is the hard part of VB.NET, not the language itself.
God, it doesn't seem to be getting easier either with the .NET Standard, Core, .NET Core, all the different stuff that's going on there.
Which I haven't even touched, because if you can't figure it out yet, Microsoft, I'm not going to figure it out for you, and go on your journey while you figure it out. So hopefully this next version that they're coming out with, the version 3 or whatever, maybe it's even out by now because I'm not really paying much attention. Hopefully that will be the one where they're like, yeah, that's the one, we're sticking to it. But you wouldn't believe, Brent, all the different versions and whatnot you need to go do hoops through for Core to make sure things work. It's ridiculous.
I keep watching what Stack Overflow's doing with Nick Craver talking about they're porting things over to .NET Core, and he'll be like, this is amazing, this is really good. Oh my God, this is terrible. Oh, this is terrible. Everything is broken. Okay, this is cool again. And I'm like, if a guy as smart as you struggles as much figuring it out, I would be screwed.
And Nick is amazing. I mean, he's going in and submitting patches for Core and stuff like that, and I'm like, I do not want to be fixing Microsoft's code for them. That is not my job at all.
Yeah. Dave asks, he says, a security update for SQL Server X cumulative update. Which one should I apply and where? Go to SQLServerUpdates.com, and on the homepage of SQLServerUpdates.com, we tell you what the most recent patches are, and you can go from there. Joseph says, regarding SQL Server on Linux, I just joined an Oracle on Linux shop that is being pushed into SQL Server by market forces. I would love to see this. Is it market forces? Is this like Jedis? And they're like, yeah, this is the database platform you are looking for, and they're pushing it across.
Hadouken!
He says Microsoft SQL Server on Linux appeals to us just for porting purposes. I mean, like the skills that you already know on the operating system. I have passionate feelings about this. Very passionate feelings about this. Is it hard for you to find Windows sysadmins? Probably not. I'm not saying that they're cheap a dime a dozen. They're still hard to find good people. But is it going to be hard for you to find the documentation you want for SQL Server on Linux? Yes, that's going to be much harder. There's so much good documentation out there for SQL Server on Windows, and it really falls apart for SQL Server on Linux. Radu follows up with, so the move away from VB.NET, that's peer pressure. Otherwise, VB and C# still have language parity. I'm going to leave that one alone.
I mean, if you think so, that's fine. But, I mean, if I go to any sort of job site and I go VB.NET code versus C#, I'm going to see a lot better projects that I would want to get into as opposed to some legacy stuff with VB.NET. I mean, if you want to do VB.NET, that's fine. Go for it, man. Have at it. I'm not poo-pooing you. I'm not that developer. I'm not that guy. But for me, I want to be able to go on the projects that ring to me most because the work is what's important for me, not the language.
There's an interesting saying in business too. If you think about kind of like a grid of matrices, you can either use old tools or new tools, and you can either do old things or new things. The general advice is you can do old stuff with old tools, you can do old stuff with new tools, you can do new stuff but using old tools. You never want to do new stuff with new tools. It's just too much of a complex thing there. So if you love VB.NET, that's okay. You can still do both old stuff and new stuff. You can go find new interesting projects. You can go work in cutting-edge industries. But just know that some of the really cool new stuff may not be open to you. The doors may not be open to you if you're still using VB. Like, if we were going to start a new project in the year 2018, I wouldn't even think to hire someone with VB to do it.
No, and it probably wouldn't even be C#, frankly. So.
Yeah.
And that being said, we may be doing some C# here soon, Brent. So just
for the execution plan analysis stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In core. Go figure. Let me poo-poo it some more, and we'll end up doing it. That's what's probably going to end up happening.
Sean says, we have 3 databases on a SQL Server, each about 1 terabyte in size. Every night, the data warehouse teams run nightly processing on those that generate about 300 gigs worth of transaction log space for all 3 logs. Okay, hold on a second here. Let's think through that for just a second. You have a 1 terabyte database, and you're changing 30% of it every night. The name for this is Groundhog Day. What it means is that your ETL teams are wiping and redoing the same tables from scratch every day with no change detection. They're just continuously overwriting the whole reports table every single day and rebuilding those numbers. Long term, just thinking way far out as a consultant, don't do Groundhog Day type stuff. You're going to have a bad time. It's going to be tough around database mirroring, always on availability groups, log shipping, your backups, just because of that rate of change. Storage deduplication, just the list could go on and on. His question continues. He said, I had them stop doing a shrink, arguing that it's just going to grow again every night. Just leave it alone. Now I have all the storage guys calling me crazy, leaving those 3 files at roughly 300 gigs each. Am I crazy? You're both right. I mean, you shouldn't be doing auto shrink. You also shouldn't be leaving 300 gig log files around if they're all empty all the time. But the answer isn't to do shrinking. The answer is to go fix the Groundhog Day stuff. Sean follows up with laughing out loud. Yes, it's right. That's Groundhog Day is exactly what they're doing. Yeah, so you fix the Groundhog Day processes and then you're fine.
It needs it every single day, so don't shrink it. I mean, so yeah, maybe you're getting back, let's say you're getting back 250 gigabytes, but you need it again tonight, so you're not really saving space at all.
John says, we have a third-party app that has a Microsoft Access front end.
Oh boy. And we were just saying, VB.NET and C# are getting old.
I was going to use Access as an example too. Connecting to a SQL Server table, once the app is running and we try to update the table, there's blocking. Is there any idea that would allow us to make updates throughout the day? Like, how do I have concurrency in Microsoft Access?
Isn't that the whole problem with Access? It's like one user at a time. I mean, that is like what it was designed for. Don't use Access. Rewrite it. And apparently don't use VB.
I think you can. There may be a setting or something where it's locking the entire table.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking now stuff that I did 25 years ago. I don't recall. It was a very long time ago, but I would start messing with your connection settings because it sounds like there's some sort of weird locking going on there.
And I would always want to refer you to somebody who can help too, and it's these guys, accessexperts.com. These guys specialize in just Microsoft Access. I believe these are the ones make sure I got the right URL.
Yeah, it said Chicago.
Yes,
Perfect. Yeah.
Really smart people, really friendly. They have a couple dozen employees, I believe, now at this time, and they just specialize in Microsoft Access. Yeah, it's absolutely huge. So I would check with them. Really friendly people. They can get you an idea of what it'll be like to make it go faster. And then, good night, the last question that we're going to take, because we're not going to have an answer. Alex asks, what's the best way to troubleshoot view definition mutex weights? Information regarding this weight is very scarce.
Is it really a problem, or is it just in your list of weights that are happening? I don't know. What I would do is I would type in google.com, and if there's not much there, there's probably a page from SQLskills.com, but Paul probably has some information on it. Check to see if he thinks it's an ignorable weight. But I mean, there's plenty that I see in the list. But is it your top weight, your second top weight, or are you just talking about number 70 in the list of weights that you're looking up?
God. My first guess is to do some kind of logging to a table, like log SP who is active to a table to see which queries are waiting on view definition mutex. My first thought is, have you got something like an application that's continuously checking the contents of views, like a monitoring tool to go through and assess slow queries? Maybe it's written poorly and it's trying to go get definitions of views. Or you have insane concurrency, like really, really bad concurrency, or something's got it. I've seen once where somebody had an alter view embedded in their code, and they were doing that by accident. But if you look and see what queries are being blocked by it, I bet that's going to be a big eye-opener.
He follows up and says it's his second top weight. That's crazy. I've never seen it even in like the top 10, I don't think.
Yeah, no. All right, well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week at Office Hours, and we will see y'all next week. Adios.
Bye.